Thanks for joining us. I'm Megan Roberts. We begin tonight in the Northwest Territories, where the government has released its long-awaited after-action report looking into the 2023 wildfire season. It was a devastating year. 70% of the territory's population fled, and about 4 million hectares of land burned. This report was originally supposed to be released in December, but it was pushed back because of what were called logistical delays. Now, a clearer picture is being painted of what went right and what went wrong that spring and summer. Sydney Cohen has been reading the report. She joins us now live with what we've learned. So, Sydney, what did the report find?
So this 164-page report was prepared by Transitional Solutions, Inc. It isn't meant to find fault or assign blame. Really, it looks at what happened and recommends ways the government can improve emergency management. It probably validates a lot of what everyone who lived through the wildfires experienced. A general sense of confusion inside and outside of the government. Who is in charge of what? Who can issue evacuation orders and authorize re-entry? The report found that the emergency management structure, which has a bunch of levels and can be confusing, lacked coordination, and that caused delays and duplications. And there were issues with training. The authors estimate that fewer than 50% of people in key roles weren't appropriately trained. And on top of that, previous risk assessments simply didn't consider the evacuation of Yellowknife. The report's authors also found that many GNWT workers didn't know whether they were supposed to work remotely or not, meaning some employees were overworked while others took what some people called evacations. The authors say residents felt abandoned, some people stood in line for a flight for hours, and vulnerable people fell through the cracks. The report points out that government messaging was inconsistent and unclear. Actually, a Fort Smith resident quoted in the report says they received better information from family and friends than they did from the government.
Okay, so a lot of information there about what people experienced. What are some of the takeaways?
So one of the big ones was the need for one centralized emergency management organization. The authors say the GNWT should do this right away, like within the year. They say one unified territorial emergency management agency could eliminate confusion, it could provide coordination support to local authorities, and it could just make for a more effective response. And the government doesn't need to reinvent the wheel here. The report pointed out similar agencies that exist in Alberta, New Brunswick, and Saskatchewan. And another key recommendation is to work with Indigenous governments in emergency management and recognize them as equal partners. The authors also recommend exploring better options for insurance and disaster relief and drafting a comprehensive list of essential services personnel and partners so that they know exactly who to go to as soon as an emergency happens.
Okay, so then what happens next?
Right, so the government issued a statement today right after the report went public. In it, Premier R.J. Simpson says that the GNWT has already taken actions in many of the areas identified by the report, but he did not get more specific than that. Minister of Municipal and Community Affairs, Vince McKay, says the report offers a clear and honest look at how the GNWT responded to the wildfire emergencies. He says since 2023, they've updated the NWT emergency plan to clarify roles and responsibilities and implemented new training across the public service, and they're working with community governments. Now, what we don't know is if the GNWT will accept any or all of the other recommendations, like forming that one emergency management agency. This statement says a formal response will come this summer and that the government won't comment further until then.
Okay, we'll certainly be waiting to see what that response is. Thank you for all your work on this, Sydney.
Thank you.
Communities in southeastern Manitoba are dealing with raging wildfires right now. And today, RCMP say 2 bodies have been found. The victims are an adult man and a woman.
While we cannot confirm their identities until an autopsy is completed, we were aware that these individuals have been trapped in the fire. Due to extreme conditions yesterday afternoon, emergency personnel were not able to reach the location until this morning.
The Lac du Bonnet fire is just one of 24 active fires in the province. Nearly 1,000 people have been evacuated. Officials have said the fires are spreading quickly, and they're now threatening the borders with Saskatchewan and Ontario. Out-of-province water bombers have been deployed for support. The Yukon government is working on a Public Lands Act. It'll update the current rules, which were made in the 1980s. The territory put out a feedback report after meeting with 50 organizations. Gabrielle Plonka tells us what was said.
The Yukon's new Public Lands Act will draft rules for the backcountry, like driving ATVs or building off-grid cabins. It'll also draft rules for long-term land management. During consultation last summer, Yukoners had a lot of opinions about how that should look.
Land is a topic that brings out a lot of passion in Yukoners. It's something that we all care deeply about, whether it's for protection or it's for development, it's for stewardship, maybe it's for use, for going for a walk. And so we saw that throughout the What We Heard report, as a lot of that passion was coming through.
People wanted more land developed into housing and more involvement with Yukon First Nations, including land use planning. Officials say there's a few ways those priorities could be legislated. For example, opening the pathway for entities other than the government to develop public land.
But you can see opportunity where we should pass that opportunity to the private sector to develop the land as well as build the houses that eventually are built there.
There's also the question of baking First Nations final agreements into the legislation itself. During consultation, First Nations talked about honoring land use plans so that significant areas would be protected from development.
Where we could have an ecological reserve system that would be placed on areas where a land use plan identifies an area of ecological significance.
Now this feedback is going back to the steering committee. The Yukon government and Yukon First Nations will draft the new legislation. Officials say this will take a significant amount of time. That means we're at least 2 years or longer from actually seeing the new law. Gabrielle Plonka, CBC News, Whitehorse.
Yukon MP Brendan Hanley says the territory stands to benefit from the new Liberal government in Ottawa, even if he's not in cabinet. 3 Northern MPs are at the cabinet table in Prime Minister Mark Carney's government. Hanley says this is a signal that the government is serious about attacking problems in the region.
We know that all of those are priorities in the Yukon as well. And so when I see a strong commitment to the North, then I will play my part as the Yukon MP to ensure that the Yukon is included in those priorities, whether we're talking about the need, and we know there's a need for energy infrastructure, for instance. We know we're in a critical need for housing and infrastructure investments. So, but I think writ large, the North is prominent in cabinet, and the Yukon, we will all expect the Yukon to have its share.
Hanley wouldn't say if he was considered for a cabinet spot. NWT MP Rebecca Alty was named Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations. She's the first MP from the territories to serve in cabinet in nearly 20 years. The new Liberal cabinet has held its first meeting, and the first order of business was to deliver a tax cut. Prime Minister Mark Carney says it'll lead to more than $800 in savings for 2-income households. The CBC's Evan Dyer looks at how the new government's economic agenda may play out.
It's my pleasure on behalf of the cabinet to sign this order to deliver that tax cut.
The first official act of Mark Carney's new cabinet was to sign off on a middle-class tax cut to come into effect by July 1st. His new finance minister says the government expects other parties to back the measure.
So this is a way for all parliamentarians to show up and say, yes, we support Canadians at a time where they need a break.
But while many Canadians will see a tax break, it turns out they won't be seeing a budget anytime soon. The first clear breakdown of spending and revenues will be a less detailed fall economic statement.
The first thing you do is the first step of this government is a middle-class tax cut. That's the first thing. You start with that. Then you say, well, you need to have a throne speech to say what are the priorities of the government. And once you've done that, then you do an economic statement, which is going to be the fall economic statement.
For Alberta to realize its true energy potential, we need the federal government to get out of the way.
There were more signs this morning that Alberta's Premier Danielle Smith is spoiling for a fight with the federal government over pipelines and national unity.
I've let the new Prime Minister know in no uncertain terms that we need Team Canada to be on Team Alberta for once. We need guaranteed corridor and port access to tidewater off the Pacific, Arctic, and Atlantic coast.
Like Poilievre yesterday, Smith took aim at the inclusion of anti-pipeline activist Stephen Guilbeault in the cabinet, although his new cabinet post, Culture, has nothing to do with energy or pipelines. And today, Guilbeault took the bait.
As far as I know, there are no investors right now. There are no companies that are saying that they want to build an east-west pipeline. And as you know, these things are built by companies, not government.
But the only minister from Saskatchewan said he was in cabinet with a different agenda.
The whole premise is to make sure that all levels of government understand what frustrates our province. And I think the Prime Minister has a good handle on that.
While Carney was elected mainly to handle the relationship with Washington, the relationship with the provinces, and especially with Alberta and Saskatchewan, looks likely to consume a lot of his attention. Evan Dyer, CBC News, Ottawa.
The Calumet City Council plans to euthanize loose dogs in the city 24 hours after their capture by municipal enforcement. It's the latest move against what residents are calling a recurring problem. At a meeting this week, Council unanimously voted in favor of bylaw amendments that would allow for the change. There is currently a maximum hold period of 7 days for loose dogs. Councillor Amber Aglukark says the bylaw amendments are important and highlight the council's concerns about loose dogs in the city.
It's hard to want to take a stroll through Calumet when you know that you're guaranteed to run into like multiple loose dogs downtown, and it's not fair to Calumet to continue being at risk of potentially being attacked by loose dogs.
The 24-hour hold period could extend to a maximum of 72 hours if the dogs are captured after hours, like on holidays or weekends. The changes would also grant municipal enforcement officers the power to destroy an animal at any time if it's loose, unlicensed, or posing a threat. The amendments will go through a third reading at a later date. The Yukon government has released its draft plan for the Alaska Highway multi-use trail. The territory hopes the expanded trail would be a safer alternative for active commuters. The trail would be about 30 kilometers long, starting from the Carcross Cutoff and going to the North Klondike Junction. The Yukon government hopes to make the corridor more accessible for people who are biking, walking, or running along the highway. The draft plan proposes separating most of the trail from the highway, using safety barriers in some places, and creating rest stops and crossing sections.
The Alaska Highway, outside of the section I mentioned, Robert serves the 2 Mile Hill, there are no trails along the highway. Yet the highway is a key link in town to get, from one community to another and into downtown. So certainly we've heard from people who do ride the highway because that's the most direct route for them to take. It's maybe one of only a couple routes that they have available. And the speed of traffic on the highway, the gravel that's on the highway that gets tossed up by vehicle tires certainly makes it feel unsafe.
The Yukon government is holding an information session tonight at the White Horse Waterfront Wharf, and there's another one tomorrow at the Canada Game Centre from 4 to 6 p.m. Yukoners can also provide feedback online until June 3rd. Greenhouses, ammunition, and freezers. Those are just a few of the things people in the NWT's Sawtooth region say will help them put food on the table. They shared that message with their MLA as he toured the region. He was joined by representatives from Nutrition North and Food Banks Canada. The CBC's Leanie Lambrink was with them.
Beatrice Kosh of Toledo is struggling to pay for groceries. She doesn't have the money to buy flour for Bannock.
Like my neighbor Sarah, she's an elder next door to. She gave me a bowl of flour. So me and my common-law, we meet Bannock yesterday. So we had Bannock, we're happy, But then Can't keep on asking her. She's an elder.
Sawtooth MLA Danny McNeely brought Food Banks Canada and Nutrition North to each community in his region last week. The purpose was for both organizations to meet with people in the Sawtooth and learn about their needs. They were also getting people's thoughts on setting up a food distribution hub in the region. The plan would be to make regular deliveries of donated food to each community, a way to help people with the high cost of groceries.
When you're looking at bread, you're looking at $6 for bread. 2 liters of milk is $6. Carrots are $3.89. 18-pack eggs are $8.49.
These people just came in. They're thinking about setting up a food bank. It's a great idea. It'll help a lot of people.
Maybe it's a good thing they're going to start that. It's like we'll be able to help a lot of people have food in their fridge and being able to make it by each month, I guess.
Well, if it's free, it's good. It's good that they're providing that for us, because anytime we have a northern store and co-op store, they're really expensive.
Yeah, I think that's really going to help the town, and I think it'll make a big difference, because I know there's a lot of people that are struggling here in town.
But the conversation wasn't just about food banks. Residents talked about other ways to improve food security too. Everything from greenhouses to grow their own produce to ammunition to harvest caribou and moose. Things that Food Banks Canada and Nutrition North say their funding can be used for.
Security is not just what we can do in the store, it's what we can do that's around us. You know, a lot of times our people don't just go to the store to secure the food, it's on the land as well.
Now that the tour is over, McNeely's next step is to find a coordinator who can work out the details of the food distribution hub. He also needs to find a way to pay for that position. Why is that necessary? I'll have that story later this week on Northbeat. Lainey Lambrink, CBC News, Yellowknife.
As Donald Trump's trade war continues, a farmer in Ontario is hoping his innovative produce will help Canada become less reliant on the U.S. His lettuce is made entirely by machines, a process some think could be the way of the future. Lisa Shing has that story.
There's some major innovation happening at this greenhouse an hour north of Toronto. A family horse farm turned lettuce growers. Haven Greens says it's doing something few have done before, especially on this scale.
We get to see the full life cycle, basically.
From seeding to germination in these boxes, all the way to harvesting 10,000 pounds a day, everything is done by machines.
We have sensors that measure temperature, light intensity, humidity levels, pressure levels. Everything within this greenhouse is automated. No one touches this crop.
Not only that, the precise amount of water, light, nutrients, all decided by artificial intelligence.
Canadians are looking a lot more closely at where our food comes from. We still rely a lot on the U.S. 90% of our leafy greens come from south of the border, so Wilmot says he hopes his operation will give Canadians another homegrown option.
Did I see the trade war coming? No, I did not. But I was sick and tired of effectively old, slimy, smelly lettuce.
That's super crunchy.
The federal government and several provinces have invested millions into automating food production. It requires less labor and reduces greenhouse gas emissions with fewer trucks needed to haul produce across the continent. Some scientists say the expensive technology has to be made available to everyone.
We have to keep small farmers also in mind because we don't want to, we want them to operate and thrive in this situation.
There are other concerns about using AI in agriculture.
We know now, right, the environmental costs in terms of data storage, the energy costs.
At Haven Greens, Wilmot says he's using solar energy, recapturing emissions, aiming to be net zero in a couple of years, betting produce like his is the future of farming. Lisa Shing, CBC News, King City, Ontario.
If you're planning a trip to Hawaii, it might cost you more. State lawmakers have passed a first-of-its-kind bill that will tax tourists to help fund its environmental protection. Joanna Wagstaff tells us how the green fee works and what Canadians think about it.
Would you pay more money as a tourist to protect the environment of the place you're visiting?
Yeah, because it's, I'm visiting someone else's home and their environment.
Yeah, I guess so, if I know that they are actually protecting the environment.
I guess it just depends on what I can afford at the time. But whatever they have to increase it to keep it so it stays what it needs to be.
Real question. Hawaii just passed a new climate tax on tourists. Here's how it works. Hawaii already has a tax on short-term accommodations like hotels, rentals, timeshares. Right now, it's just over 10%. With the new green fee, as they're calling it, that jumps to between 11 and 14%. And cruise ships are now included. The state expects to raise about $100 million a year. And that money is already set aside for climate change impacts, things like restoring coral reefs, replenishing eroded beach sand, prepping for hurricanes, and removing invasive species like the grasses that helped fuel the deadly Lahaina wildfires in 2023. Vital projects for the environment and for Hawaii's economy. After all, tourists come for the natural beauty. Here's the problem. Hawaii actually needs more like $560 million per year to adapt to the impacts of climate change. But it's a start, and it's a big deal. This is the first U.S. state to implement this kind of tax. Other countries like Greece, the Philippines, and Bali already have similar fees, and more are considering it. So would you pay more to help protect the place you're visiting?
We also need to do more to protect our own place, and instead of charging people more, we could also just enforce things better.
Yeah, because you're visiting their place, their home, so why would you treat it poorly?
That was the CBC's Joanna Wagstaff in Vancouver. An Iqaluit-based project is one of the winners of this year's Arctic Inspiration Prize. The Pirukatugit Resource Center won $500,000 for its new program. It's called Ayungitutit, and the project aims to educate Inuit youth who are neurodiverse. Youth will learn Inuktitut land activities and other skills. The project's lead hopes the program can help strengthen youth as they develop.
That's so important for youth to see, for them to start to develop and also to feel confident, to build their self-esteem, for them to be proud of where they come from, who they are.
Mike says the program starts by lighting a kudlik every day. It's a practice she's only started as an adult, but she hopes to pass it down to younger Inuits. There's growing excitement in Rankin Inlet in Nunavut. The hamlet's new long-term care center is set to receive its first residents in less than 2 weeks. Some elders will finally be returning home after having to go south for care. The CBC's Noel Kalutjak has more.
Long-term care center in Rankin Inlet will welcome its first clients the week of May 26. It marks the return to the territory for elders who have lived in the South for years, and their families are excited to have their loved ones back in the same community and region, which will allow for more visits, the sharing of country foods, trading of stories. Emily McLean's 80-year-old mother has been living at the Embassy West for 2 years. She said she is grateful to have her mother coming home.
We became very happy when we heard our mother was coming to Rankin. She will feel like she is home, and we are very happy as a whole family. She'll be much closer. We are very happy. I screamed when I heard, and I was alone. I was just so thankful.
For Mary Kukti, the new facility means reuniting with her brother, who has also been in the South for 2 years.
When our eldest brother was sent down, it was one of the saddest days for our family. He is our eldest brother, and when we heard that he was coming to the facility, we were all emotional and very happy.
Rankin Inlet's long-term care center is the first of its kind in the territory. It has 22 permanent beds and 2 respite beds. Noel Kaludjak, CBC News, Rankin Inlet.
And that is Northbeat for tonight. For news anytime, go to cbc.ca/north. Thank you for watching. I'm Megan Roberts. Have a good night.